Welcome to Retirement Rescue Radio, a show specifically designed to help retirees and pre-retirees maximize their financial efficiency so you can live the retirement lifestyle you've always imagined. Your host is Nate Miller, investment advisor representative and author of the CPR Retirement Rescue Roadmap. Nate discusses thoughts and ideas from some of today's most knowledgeable professionals in the field of finance. He offers strategies along the way to help you make better financial decisions so you can maximize your retirement. This is Retirement Rescue Radio.
Well, hey there, Retirement Rescue Radio listeners. We have a very special episode today. Today, I'm speaking with George Schofield. So Dr. George Schofield is a professional advisor, navigator, connector, and an author. His individual and business leader clients are people that are working to move beyond habits and patterns and not knowing what they don't know. And he helps them become transformative thinkers, create adaptable plans, and ask better questions and adopt great tools to get unbiased feedback. I think one of the very special things about Dr. Schofield is the questions that he asks. He might just be one of the best question askers out there. And we're going to discuss his book, How Do I Get There From Here? Planning for Retirement When the Old Rules No Longer Apply. And we're going to talk about how to set more meaningful goals when it comes to retirement. And you'll also understand his definition of retirement and why he doesn't like the word retirement and what he would replace it with. And we're going to talk about how COVID has changed the nature of goals and the big questions that you should be asking to better understand what you want from life, both in and out of retirement. Also, Dr. George has been kind enough to send us several copies of his book, and we're going to be sending them out until they're gone. All you got to do is, one, subscribe to the podcast, two, leave an honest rating, and then copy and paste that rating into an email at asknate@retirementrescueradio.com. Include your iTunes username and address, and we'll ship that book to you absolutely free. And also make sure you stay all the way to the end where he gives additional resources to help you navigate this important life transition, including resources that will even help you think about how to think about your thinking. And so with all that being said, please enjoy my interview with Dr. George Schofield. All right, Retirement Rescue Radio listeners, we've got a very special guest with us today. We've got George Schofield. George, welcome.
Thank you.
Are you ready to help rescue some retirements?
Absolutely.
Excellent. Before we get into this, my listeners have come to enjoy a little something that you normally can't find on the web for a lot of my interviewees. And so if there's anything that you can't just go to your website or anything like that and find out about you, is there anything interesting or unique that you would like to share with some of our listeners just to help them get to know you a little bit more on a personal level?
Well, absolutely. So let me talk about the evolution of my own life. In a way, I couldn't create a goal because I didn't know what I didn't know. I kind of had to work my way into it. So what's different about me, among other things, is that I'm quite a good photographer. I'm very good at composition. What do you bring in the foreground? What do you put in the background? What do you do with positive space, negative space? And I was looking for something artistic or creative that I could do in this period of my life that would be a total challenge to me. And I stumbled onto Ikebana, which is the Japanese art of floral design. And I've now been doing this for a very long time, and I'm an internationally ranked Sugetsu Ikebana sensei or instructor, not somebody that you would normally associate with doing that. It's been a huge gift to me because it always takes me out of the familiar into something that I really have to just be present in that moment. The plant material, the vase, whatever it is I'm working with isn't going to come to me. It's like little kids, babies. I have to go to it.
Okay, that's excellent. That's one of the most interesting, I think, responses I've had to that. So what led you to want to try to find something to express yourself creatively? What led to that?
So I started out with the notion that I was somebody who wasn't going to retire, as in I wasn't going to, one day I worked and then I got a gold watch and then I never worked again. I was looking for various activities and engagements on my own and with other people that would be stimulating to me in ways that were different than what I already knew. Because what I know about retirement is if you keep doing the same thing you did before, it's less rich. So I needed to take a period of time and wander around and find out, what are other people doing? What would work for me? What's out there that I don't know about? And I came up, because of my photography and my interest in composition, I came upon Ikebana, and I'd have to tell you, it looks easy. It's not easy at all. And it's been a huge benefit to me just to be challenged in that way, in a way I didn't see coming, and I didn't know what I didn't know.
Only those that are really good at something make it look easy. A lot of time doing something hard in order to make it look easy.
Right. Look at some of the swimming athletes, or the others. How much they work and how hard and how much time they put into it. I can't see. I just see the grace of them swimming through the water.
Absolutely. And I taught swimming lessons for a few years when I was in college. And so I had to learn how to do all of the strokes. And so I'm good enough to understand that I'm so bad that I can recognize the skill when I see it. Yeah, absolutely. Great. Well, then, so you mentioned a little something about retirement and what you felt you needed to do. It wasn't just getting the gold watch and stopping working. So how would you define retirement? Or I guess, would you give it some different definition?
Well, to tell you the truth, I would like to put the word retirement in the garbage disposal and turn it on the shriek.
Yeah.
Because I think we are frequently trapped in language that doesn't serve us well anymore, and actually isn't true anymore. So I began to think of the notion of release as opposed to retirement, which meant I was released to make a different series of decisions. My children no longer lived with me. I have 7 grandchildren, and they have lives of their own. My wife's a professional woman, been a CEO, does a whole bunch of things. I needed to, one, not set it up in advance. In other words, I didn't have 5 goals that I was going to immediately go after. I gave myself a few months to say, okay, I'm going to wander around out there, and I'm going to ask good questions. So actually, one of the things I would like our listeners to know is, and I say this over and over again, the quality of the question drives the quality of the answer. So for me, the great bozo question is, when can I retire? The smart question is, what would I like my life to be like, and who will I have to be to have that happen? It's a much harder question to ask, and it takes a while. But I found that if I gave myself time and wandered around and saw what other people were doing and tried some things I'd never tried before and read, and simply went out and practiced not being overbooked, which was not a bit, given my biography, was not a particularly easy thing to do. So I thought of myself as having training wheels, to tell you the truth. And I learned to ride in circles and across the yard and the rest of it, like somebody with training wheels. And because I wanted to go from I don't know what I don't know to I know what I don't know. That was the huge leap for me. And then I could go after once I knew what I didn't know, I could go after it.
Okay. And you mentioned something there just briefly. I want to dig into it a little bit. You said, one purpose, and you didn't want to just have one thing, or maybe you even said like 5 or things like right away to do. But I know you've talked a lot about this whole idea of purpose, and not just having that one specific thing that you're just trying to look for your entire life. And once you find it, that's going to be good, but more of like multiple purposes. And I believe you have a term, you call it ponies on the track.
Right. And that was exactly what I ended up choosing to do. So understand, I had a whole banking career, and I was vice president in a major international bank. And then when my children went away, I went and got a second master's and a PhD. So I'm an organizational and a developmental psychologist. Oftentimes, developmental psychology means children. How does a 2-year-old get to be a great 4-year-old? I'm interested in how a 50-year-old turns into a fabulous 80-year-old. That's what a lot of my research and my writing has been about. So, in my opinion, and this is all my opinion, folks, a lot of the literature out there suggests to people that how they're going to be happy and how they're going to be successful is to find their true purpose. Well, I think that's a trap, and I actually think it's a disservice, because what might look like my purpose at 65 might not be my purpose at 73. I don't want one. So I wanted to work on my outside activities. I decided that because I like to write, I would begin to write. I wanted to find a new way to engage with my grandchildren. There were a whole variety of things that I wanted to do. And so rather than having one great purpose in which I had to pay back because I set that whole aside and said, okay, I want to give back, but I raised my children by myself. I've been engaged all these years. It's not like I only worked. So paying back is a very different experience for me. I feel like I've been paying forward my whole life. So it's not that I don't want to pay. It's just that I, George, don't think that suddenly at 65, poof, I had the money, I could stop, and I needed to pay back. I think I've been paying forward all the way along with my children, with their friends, with how I've lived my life, with what I've been engaged with, a whole variety of things. So what's important to understand is that I came to the conclusion that I would choose 5 or 6 things. And I wouldn't work on all of them every day. I wouldn't pay attention to them all every day. I would rotate. So imagine that you have a stable of 5 ponies and you water them and you exercise them, but you don't do it the same way every day. And what I found was doing one thing, working on my book that NASDAQ picked up as a must read. I couldn't work on that full time, and I didn't want to work on that full time. But doing that stimulated me for doing volunteer work with kids. I've been reading to 3rd graders in an impoverished school, and that gave me energy to come back and do something else. And in my working with individuals and couples and their grown children, sometimes helping people, in effect, say, "Whoa, wait a minute." If the smart question isn't about my retirement and the smart question is about what would I like my life to be like and who will I have to be to have that happen, I got lots of energy from the other things and I could come back and do that. And that in turn gave me energy for some of the other ponies on the track. So it's a more than a metaphor for me. It's a way of life that's really worked.
Oh yeah, I can definitely relate because there's, several things that I do. I obviously, number one, I'm a financial advisor. So yeah, I love that. But like you mentioned with your book, it's like, if that's all I did all day, every day, I would go nuts. So I've got, real estate investing. I do that. I love to exercise. I'm a black belt in Taekwondo. So
are you? Wow.
Yeah. Thank you. And so lots of different interests. And you don't spend 24 hours a day on them, but the time that you allot to them, you put your all into it during that time.
Right.
And so you mentioned your book. So let's go down that vein here for a second. And you mentioned how if you did that, all the time, you'd go nuts. But the name of it, how do I get there from here? Planning for retirement when the old rules no longer apply. And boy, does that apply now. Post-COVID. So kind of explain a little bit about what led you to write that book and then really how much it pertains even now post-COVID.
So I had quite a few people come to me and say, I have a plan. I want this plan to come out exactly where I meant it to come out. And by the way, once I have the plan, I want to put it in the drawer because I expect this to all come true. Well, way pre-COVID, I found myself going, it doesn't look like it's gonna work. There are too many variables, if you will. So the first part, how do I get there from here? There have to be organized ways to move ahead, if you will, but it doesn't necessarily look like a lockstep plan. It actually is iterative planning. I'm going to create this piece of it, but I know that 2 weeks from now or 6 months from now, I'm going to have to revisit it. So I prefer to work with people in terms of their intentions. I'm not saying that we don't do some planning, because we do. But if people are pretty clear about their intentions, my experience is they're much more willing to work with it on a regular basis and come back and say, whoa, I need to move this piece around. This proved out not to be true for me. Because in a way, this period of our life is ongoing research. It's what's going to work for me and what did I discover? And what does that say about the choices that I'm going to make. But people have to be willing to live with some level of risk and some level of uncertainty to make that work.
Yeah. And so I want to touch on this because you're all about the goal setting, but it sounds like it's because I mean, a lot of us that are in the entrepreneurial world or we're in the corporate world and we're used to setting goals. And a lot of us are probably familiar with the acronym SMART goals, like strategic, measurable, actionable, all that, right?
I love the word SMART.
We love it, right? And I'm definitely, I can say I'm guilty of that. I want to find the metrics on something. If here's my goal, I want to back figure how to get to it. I'm going to put numbers to it. So that, I mean, it's the same thing with business. It's like, I want this much revenue, so I got to put this much activity in, this much marketing to, right. Here's my percentages. And so I am very guilty of doing that. But one thing that struck me when you talked about how you came to your goal of you wanted to explore more of the creative side of George Schofield, that's a very vague goal, right? And it's like, how do you take that?
So that's why I'm distinguishing between goals, Nate, and intentions.
Okay.
Because a goal is something that I think that I understand is locked in, and I'm probably going to want to assign a metric to it. Mm-hmm. At least in the beginning, when I'm working with people, I want them to have some intentions and go out and explore them and do research around them, and then come back and be smarter about it so that we can do better planning, or we can do better staging, or we can say we need to modify it in this way. So if the word retirement doesn't work for me and I prefer the word release, I'm not opposed to planning at all. And I'm not even opposed to goals, especially financial goals. But in terms of living our lives and crafting our lives and all the cacophony that's going on around us, I'd rather have people have a number of intentions, and then we can work forward with that. But as I said, that means that one, we probably don't have a metric for it, at least in the beginning. Mm-hmm. Two, it's going to require comfort with a certain level of uncertainty. And three, it's going to really require paying attention. What's going on now? What does that say about my intentions and how I adapt? Mm-hmm. And Ikebana taught me a lot of this because in real life, it looks like they're just flowers and leaves, and they ought to behave and go where I want them to go. And you know what? They have a mind of themselves too. Absolutely. So whatever design I had in mind, I'm always negotiating with reality. And so and my grandchildren also give me regular lessons in doing reality checks, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. Because you didn't go into it saying, I want to be an Ikebana sensei. It's like
I went into it saying, this really looks interesting and it looks hard. And it was. Mm-hmm. And I was fortunate enough to have a really fine sensei of my own, who made it more fun, if you will. And she often tells the story when she started out many years ago, and she was teaching in Japan. She dropped out of it for a while and then went back, and she knew she was supposed to cut. So she cut almost all the leaves off of a branch. Mm-hmm. And rather than scolding her sensei said, Patricia, what a great thing. I see you're not afraid to cut. And it became a great metaphor for me. I'm going to have to be willing to cut, and I'm going to have to be willing to live with the consequences and learn from them. So it's been a lot of fun for me.
Good. And so, I know this is only one viewpoint, right? But, a lot of people, they work for those 30 years, 40 years, whatever it is, to get to a point called retirement. And a lot of times they've been working and they've got money, they've got work, they've got all that. Now they retire, they don't have the work, they've got the money. And so how would you go about helping them maybe take the kind of the route that you took, where they're starting off very, very vague with their intentions, and then they can go down the road to, turning those into good goals?
Right. So in the beginning, I want people to understand that they're very smart and they were very successful and they worked hard and they've followed a path of, for the most part, you have babyhood, and then you have childhood with education, and then you have high school, and you have college, and then you get married, and then you get older, and then you retire. That doesn't work anymore for a lot of people, and one size won't fit all. So my first request is they go to, I don't know a lot about this. I think maybe I need to get smarter about this. So they work with me to say, well, these look like our interests. And we can come up with places that they can go and find out about, people they can talk to, things they can read, places they can go. The assignment for me is come back with your reactions and what you learned. I want to know what you know that you didn't know before. And so if they do that, and 3 weeks later or 4 weeks later, they come back, two things happened. One of which, they made a commitment to themselves and to me to do the work of going out. And two, they have a due date in which they come back, and we have a much smarter conversation in which we can begin to set some interim goals and some dates and take it from there. I don't have a way to make it more specific for you than that, because in fact, we start with the big picture. We try to get real. We winnow it out. Some of the things that fall out are things they're interested in, but I've had people come back to me and say 5 years, 7 years later, I need to start over again. I'm not the same person I was at 65. I'm now 73. I've had a really good time, but this isn't so stimulating for me anymore. So this is kind of an iterative process, which is a huge part of quality of life later.
Their goals changed.
Right.
At one point, I had a goal of running a half marathon. I've done that. You know what I realized during that? I really don't like running a whole lot.
That's great.
So you're not going to see me out running marathons, and when I release, right? It's just, yeah. Okay.
Been there, done that. Now I ride my bike every other day, anywhere from 12 to 18 miles. Yeah. If I do it every day, it wouldn't be fun. If I do it every other morning, and I live in Florida, so I have pretty flat country and good weather for it. If I do it every other morning, it really refreshes my head. So I have to pay attention to frequency and what I'm getting out of it. And so my goal is no longer to ride 30 miles like I used to. It's now to show up every other morning and ride somewhere between 12 and 18 miles and hum to myself sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's awesome. Bicycling is actually something that I took up as well, because one thing about running was I realized I just didn't get to see any different nature. It was like all the same nature, because I could only go a certain amount of, miles around my house. I'm like, I'm going to bicycle. And you've just got so much more that you can have access to that you can see at that point. So, and it's not as hard on the joints either. So that works out well too.
It does.
Okay. And so I think I heard you mention this at one point, and this kind of dovetails into your comment earlier about how you read to impoverished children. You mentioned I think it was another podcast episode that I heard, that you did that because you said you have an acting and a improv background.
I definitely have an improv background.
Okay. Yes. I want you to expand a little bit on that. What type of background did you have? What do you like doing? And when you read to the kids, are you putting voices with that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Sometimes. So you need to understand where that came from. So my story is, when my boys were 3 and 7, I became a single parent. And that was a very different role in my age group. And I raised the boys by myself until they were gone. And so, as most people who are single parents know, at some point, you're going to have to find someplace else to put some interest and some energy, because as wonderful as raising kids is, and I have fabulous boys, it was really easy for me to get lost in the shuffle. And so out of the blue came to me the opportunity to study improv. And so one evening a week, it was all it was, I would go, and instead of going home, I had a sitter and dinner taken care of and all that, I would go do improv. And I discovered I was pretty good at it. But not just that, it took me out of myself. It got me connected to other people that I normally would not be connected to, doing something that was a challenge for me, and that was fun. So I've kept that interest and ability. And so I was given an opportunity to read once a month to third graders in an underfunded school. And most of these third graders, English is not their first language, and it isn't their parents' first language. And so, fortunately, the third grade teacher who was fabulous, and I learned to partner together. And so the story goes that I was reading a book, third grader's book about a tsunami approaching a Japanese island in, I would guess, the late 1800s. And I realized I was reading to them. These kids hadn't seen a tsunami. They hadn't seen Japan. They, they hadn't seen a lot of these things. And it happened that the teacher had some aqua-colored beach towels. And so I divided the group into three. We had the rice growers, if you will, because that was the economy. And we had other kids be the tsunami, literally, with the aqua with the aqua beach towels. And then there was a grandfather and a granddaughter that lived up on the hill and could see the tsunami coming, but the village, the rice growers couldn't, because they were down at ground level. So we read a little bit and then we acted it out, and we read a little bit and we acted it out, and we read a little bit and we acted it out. And that for me became a way of engaging with kids for whom some of the content of the book was outside of their experience. My wife Linda and I do a fair amount of travel, so I also began to bring them postcards from Morocco, for instance, which used to be under the sea. Well, most of them haven't seen a desert. They haven't seen North Africa, and they had trouble imagining what it looked like sand that used to be at the bottom of the ocean. So I brought them postcards, and we began to turn those postcards into stories too. Sorry, I've gone on too long, but it's a way to pay attention to where the opportunities are and experiment. And I'm very fortunate, and I've got to give her credit, that the teacher and I talked about how to experiment with this, and I not only brought the postcards back, I gave them to the kids to take home so that they would, oversized postcards. So I don't know how many other kids in their neighborhood had a picture of the desert in Morocco, but the kids in our third grade did, and we slowly built their own home library with books and pictures.
Excellent. And George, I don't think you went along too long on that one, because you could see how your face just lights up when you talk about it.
That's great.
You wouldn't have done this had you not gone through your own course of how you set your goals and how you do what you do. Right. And so that's important. So
and it's a demonstration for me. I couldn't have planned this in advance. You know, I had to show up, pay attention, and do the work. I mean, it really boiled down to that. Where's the opportunity? Who do I have to partner with? How do I do it in a way that honors the kids and doesn't make them feel less than or like they should have experience that they don't have? It worked.
Good. And so there are, financial coaches that are all over the place out there, right? And so you can Google financial coach and it's going to have all kinds of results behind it. So what do you think sets you apart from a lot of the financial coaches that are out there right now?
Well, first of all, I'm not a financial coach. If you look
that's right. You don't like the word coach. I'm sorry.
Well, I don't like the word coach either, because I think the sports metaphor for us doesn't work for the most part. It's another one of those mindsets. If I can just say this for a minute.
Absolutely.
The sports metaphor assumes a standard playing field with rules, with opposing teams and coaches who have the experience from what's gone on before that can really. How many of us are now playing in a pre-established field with rules, with known opponents who must follow the rules, and clear scoring, and coaches who have all the experience to tell us what to do?
No.
So I wrote a blog called "Don't Call Me Coach." It works in sports. I don't think it works in this. So first of all, I'm not a financial guy, and I don't give a financial advice. I don't have anything. That would be you. I would send them to you in a heartbeat. What I do from a developmental psychology standpoint, because I'm not a therapist, and I've been very careful to not be a therapist. What I do from a developmental psychology standpoint is figure out what people with them, I work with them to figure out what they're going to have to be good at. What you were good at 4 was not what you had to be good at 10. And what you were great at 12 was not going to serve you so well at 25. We have this incorrect notion that we get to be 45 or 50 and we're complete and we have the skills that we need. I don't think that's true at all. Mm-mm. So from a human developmental psychology standpoint, I, George, now am having to become good at some things that were never presented to me before. It's not that I can't tap into what I was good before, but what I was good at before doesn't always serve me well now. So this is called lifelong development. That's what I really believe.
Absolutely. And so I think that kind of leads into something that I've heard you talk about as well. So lifelong development. Talk about your feelings towards college and, saving money for your kids. A lot of my clients want to help out with college for their grandkids. And you've got a little bit of a different take on college or anything like that. So go ahead and go down that.
I do. First of all, I believe in higher education. Mm-hmm. I think to be competitive in the coming world, at least for the foreseeable future, college degrees are going to continue to be absolutely incredibly important. Mm-hmm. There may be little's the wrong word. There may be narrow slots where people can get some sort of technical training or they're beyond brilliant and they can make it work. But for the most part, I think kids are going to need college educations and a college degree. That said, my prediction is that the college degree no longer is a lifetime license to work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So suppose I had graduated, I didn't, but suppose I graduated as a pharmacist. Mm-hmm. That would be my license to become a pharmacist, and I would, the meds would change, and so I would have to learn about that. I think that what's going to happen for most people to stay employed after college is that they're going to almost have a lifelong process of updating courses, or there's a brand new technology that comes out, or there's a brand new approach to medicine, or there's a brand new approach to finance. And mm-hmm. They're going to not only have to study that, but they're going to have certification to remain employed. And so I, George, would rather take a look at funding those certifications and make sure that my 7 grandchildren have a certain amount of money to invest after college, because it's not going to stop with college for them. They're going to have to spend money for certifications in new things, probably for the rest of their working lives.
Absolutely. I mean, in the professional industry that I'm in, we call it continuing education. Like, we have to take a certain amount of continuing education credits every single year. I mean, if you were to think about that, if you're working with an advisor or talking to a financial advisor who got their license and never studied anything new ever, you would kind of want to run away.
So then on top of it, if you throw in, for a lot of people, disruptive change, supposing there was no more stock market, mm-hmm. and there was some other form of
investing.
It's not just a question of getting better at what you're good at or knowing more about what field you're in. I think we need to be prepared for the likelihood that disruptive change is going to come along, and a lot of our assumptions, a lot of our skills aren't going to count anymore. We're really going to have to manage our careers and manage our work and manage our experience and skills mm-hmm. consciously going forward.
Absolutely. I mean, cryptocurrency is a good example of that. COVID's a great example of that. I mean, huge disruptors.
Right.
Okay. And so we I guess, bringing up now financial advising, you've got a pretty cool story about how you chose your financial advisor. I'd like you to expound on that a little bit, if you could.
So my wife and I lived in San Francisco then, mm-hmm. and we were coming to the point where we really needed a professional to work with us, because we could do a certain amount with a certain level of wealth, but you come to a certain point where I would not do my own.
Maybe I'm missing something, right?
Yeah. I would not do my own tonsillectomy, mm-hmm. and it's not my expertise. So we needed somebody with expertise, and so we looked around and we had concluded we wanted someone in a small business rather than a large business. And Linda would prefer to have a woman be our advisor rather than a man. She had some concern that because we had this experience where we went to see a man and he talked to me and pretty much ignored her.
Ooh.
Like half the money isn't hers and she hasn't earned half of it or more. So I went to one of my friends who's a venture capitalist in San Francisco and said, Steve, help me. And he directed us to a woman, Marin, and that was 14 or 15 years ago. And she's been fabulous for us. We created a relationship with her. She doesn't get involved in the rest of our lives. George, don't have to worry about something that I don't understand. I know a little bit, but it's not my profession. And I'm very careful not to look at the value of the portfolio every day, because
absolutely,
who needs it? Thank you very much. I'd rather look at the trend lines. So my story is that we came to the conclusion that we didn't know what we didn't know. We had to go out and get educated about what our options were. We had some preferences. We pursued them, and it really worked for us, and continues to work for us.
Great. All right. Yeah, I've since my background is I actually used to consult financial advisors all over the country before I became, where that's all I did full time was being a financial advisor. And so that was kind of my experience, my learning, my crucible really was that I got to see a lot of different scenarios. And I had heard stories like that all the time. And maybe this is part of the small town, grew up on a farm part of me. I just always found that just absolutely crazy how somebody could only talk to one person in a couple the entire time.
Right.
So,
all
right. So what would you say, how would you describe the position of life that you're in right now? It's not retirement. Would it be release, or would there be something else that you would like to?
Well, we are now at the stage of our lives where we have to make sure we have an executor who's in place and knows what to do and what our wishes are. And we've chosen my oldest son, who works for Apple and travels the world and is pretty interesting guy. So I really am answering your question. But it was really clear to me that if he was going to be our executor, that executor does not begin at our deaths. Executor begins for me now. If I've got 25 years left to live, I don't need much help. But not only do I need him to understand what the will says and the distribution of assets and burial process and whatever all our preferences are, I want somebody who knows our lives and can help us as we go along, because we don't know what's going to happen. So he actually came and he lives in California. I live in Florida. He came last week and worked every day at his job. In fact, he took over my office, and I moved my laptop to a folding table in the bedroom, which is great. But we got a chance to have conversations. We had a couple of dinner parties so he could meet our friends. He's been here a number of times, so he knows the kind of life we're trying to live. He has the list of my medical professionals. We've talked about whatever physical issues that I may have, because after 65, we tend to have one medical issue or another. So if I'm going to answer your question well, my analogy is this: I think we're making it up as we go. Linda and I are making it up as we go. And the reason we are is COVID knocked out of a lot of assumptions. We're not doing a lot of the traveling that we were doing. I'm getting interested in writing another book. I swore I would never write another book, and here I am beginning interviews and starting to really take a look at some of the things that I'm interested in. But I'm not starting. The goal isn't to write a book. For me, the goal is to begin to do the interviews and see where it takes me. So there would be an example of a process, if you will, in which I can't emphasize it up front. Toward the end, I can begin I can begin to metricize it. And there's a publisher that I've been talking to who's affiliated with my current publisher. So where we are is analogous to where my three oldest granddaughters are. They're 22. One's just graduated from UC Santa Cruz in marine sciences. One is a sophomore in college. She wants to write for children's television. And the next one down is a junior in high school. They are inventing it as they go at the moment. And unlike my original expectation that we would buy a house or we would move into a condo and it would be kind of a pre-established path, I don't think that's true for us in days of COVID, and if your friends begin to die or they begin to move away. A lot of my research is, and especially in my PhD program, is around social networks. What I know is that in what's called a strong network, people that you're really close with, and they can sort of finish your sentences. You've got a lot of shared values and shared experiences. We have a very tight, strong network. The weak network, people you don't know so well, is where we need to focus our attention now. People we don't know so well, we don't have a lot of history with them. But as our strong network begins to die off or move away to be near their kids or whatever happens, unless you work on your weak network also, you have no pool of candidates to replenish your strong network. So I can't metricize that. I can't set a goal, but I do have to make sure that we're out in traffic, meeting people we don't know and having experiences that we haven't had, because that will be the information I need to intelligently replenish and grow our strong network of friends, which will just organically begin to deteriorate at some point because people are getting older.
Well said.
So I'm just like my granddaughters. We're inventing it as we go.
Nice. Love that. Okay. Well, I think we're coming up close to our time here. So thank you for everything that you've said so far. Two, I think we're going to kind of maybe transition a little bit into some of the more philosophical questions, or I call them maybe even rapid hit, questions. And actually, before we really do that, the first thing I'll say is, or ask, do you have any recommended books? Obviously, this would be a chance to talk about, your own, but are there any other books that have kind of helped shape who you are, your thought process on what you do right now?
So, well, you can go to georgeschofield.com and you'll see you'll see my book that we've talked about. The books that I think are most important for my development right now have nothing to do with retirement or aging. They have to do with the mechanics of thinking, and they have to do with the mechanics of communication. So one of my favorite books at the moment is called Black and White Thinking. And I don't remember the subtitle, but in effect, it's the penalty of having a black and white thinking in a diverse world. So why that book is important to me is, and if I'm using outmoded tools to build a house, the house will not stand up in the long run. If I'm using outmoded language and images, which I think we do a lot, then I'm not going to be prepared for what's really happening. So I like black and white thinking. There's a book called The Tyranny of Metrics, which is one of my favorites. The point is that as we have grown into the successful nation we are, many of us have fallen into the trap of, if I can't metricize it, if I can't measure it, it's not worth paying attention to. So I actually think that's not true. There's a lot in life that either doesn't need to be metricized or isn't easily metricized, and I can embrace it anyway. The tyranny means I have to metricize everything. The other and the corollary piece to that is, I think we are a nation of fabulous problem solvers. We love to solve problems, and it's very gratifying to solve a problem and then done with that one and move on to the next. For the most part, we're living in a very complex system. And if we come upon something, whether it's our political posture or our financial posture or what's going on with the floods and forest fires and all the rest of it, if we treat it as a problem that has to be solved, I think we're missing the boat. I think we have to move to systems thinking and see what we can do to make it better and to make a dent in it without clinging to the hope that it has to be solved or I've failed. And why that's so important is, I think, when I go back to retirement again, if I look at my retirement as a problem to be solved, as opposed to something that to be created as I go along, I look at it as something to be solved, then I'm blind to everything that doesn't look like a problem that can be solved. The problem with that is, if at the risk of using the word that I just criticized, the problem with that is, I think at least half of what's out there we're going to have to look at can't be solved. It simply can't be solved because it's a complex system. So I have to, in effect, grow another set of eyes which can see the systemic issues, if you will, and learn to do systems thinking, as well as look at what I can frame as a problem and solve. And confusing the two is going to cause a lot of havoc for people in their later years when they thought they should be able to solve this and they failed. And in fact, they never could.
Yeah. So basically changing maybe how we think about certain things. And it's interesting that you bring that up. There was, I think, a point in my life where I realized that, as we grow up, we may have learned certain things that may not be correct. And those things may actually keep us from either achieving the success levels that we want to. And so we're basically working with an incorrect operating system in order to achieve what we want to achieve. And that takes the ability to think about the thoughts that we have and whether or not those thoughts are actually correct in whatever we're pertaining to. And for me, it was growing up without money. I grew up on a farm, one of 6 kids, first memory of money, telling my mom she could sell all my Ninja Turtle video cassettes. Like, that doesn't happen when you're doing well. And so I realized that some of the things that I learned might not necessarily be correct if I wanted to go on and achieve stuff. And that's very difficult to do, is to have a thought and think about, is that right?
And it's also a possibility that it was correct in 1965, but is correct in 2021. So I'm not saying, so the corollary to yours was true, no longer where you are in your life. There's also another set when said, well, worked in 1965, we're hanging on, like the word retirement. We're still hanging on to this. I think one of the pieces of magic that I bring to my work is, for people who are not accustomed to doing that kind of reflection that you just described, that some of the work, without being therapeutic, and I'm not interested in what their mother did or their father did, or they dropped on their heads when they were 3 or whatever. I don't care about any of that. My question is always, what kind of a life would you like to lead? What do we have to learn and explore for that to happen for you? What are you going to have to be good at? So I have a much more reflective approach, if you will, rather than problem solving. I'm not trying to cure anybody.
Nice. Okay. So then what would be something that 20 years from now, you would like to have it be considered absolutely absurd? Or said another way, 20 years from now, you look back and say, man, I can't believe that we used to do X.
So I think as a nation, maybe as a world, we are locked into black and white thinking. Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative, urban, rural. We have a really hard time talking outside of the world of opposites. And eventually that language becomes code. So we don't have to think about it. You can say liberal or you can say conservative. And everybody assumes they know what it means, as if there's no gray area at all. You just have these two outside points. And so I would like to wake up 20 years from now and have people go, oh my God, we were locked in all that black and white thinking, which missed 95% of what's really going on out there in the world. Thank goodness we've moved on to continuum thinking and grays as well as the blacks and whites.
I definitely agree with that. And to tell a quick story along those same lines. It involves another book. I don't know if you've read it, or I listened to it on Audible. It was Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. Mm-hmm. And there's a section in there, I'm not going to go too deep into it, but it falls along these lines. He was in Africa, and his two guides started arguing about a specific topic. I won't go into the topic at this point, but they argued about the topic. One was taking the pro and one was the con. Well, after listening to him for a little while, Matthew McConaughey chimed in, agreeing with one of them. As soon as he started agreeing with that one person started yelling at him. And the reason was because Matthew thought that they were arguing to try to figure out which one of them was right. And he told them, we are not arguing to figure out which one of us is right. We are debating. We are having a conversation to understand why the other person has that point of view. And he said, I'm sorry. And that same guy said, do not be sorry, be different.
Wow. And learn from the experience, by the way.
Yeah, because that's it. That's all you can do to be different, is you have to learn from that. Don't just keep on going and always argue, I'm right, you're wrong, I'm right, you're wrong. Well, let's try to figure out why we're all having the point of view that we have, and maybe we can come to some kind of common ground. But like you said, we're so steeped in our I'm this and you're that, black and white thinking. It makes it very difficult to have that third level.
That's right. And any of the nuances. And frankly, a lot of life is about nuance in the end. And it's part of being reflective and part of moving ahead. If you only get the black and the white, you're going to miss a whole lot of opportunities for your release or retirement.
So, as you know, when you're taking your photographs, there's a lot more color out there than just black and white.
That's right.
There you go. All right. So is there anything that you would like to share, maybe a parting piece of advice with my clients before we go? Or the best way to find you first, I would say.
Well, the best way to find me is my website, georgeschofield.com, SCHOFIELD. My email address is george@georgeschofield.com. People are welcome to email me and to go to the website. I would be happy to respond. Advice is a tricky deal, so I want to be careful. So I'll say to our listeners, it's easy to get stampeded into having to have a plan. Coming up upon the day that you no longer work in that full-time job, or afterwards, I usually ask people to have some intentions. I'm not suggesting we should have intentions, and maybe if some reasonable financial plan. But I think it's really hard for people at any age to know who they want to be and what they want to do as if it were completely plannable. Mm-hmm. So I like people to take 90 days, 120 days, and just sort of let it shake out. They don't have to be up at a certain hour. They don't have to be anywhere in particular. Maybe they're working part-time now. Work your way into it so that you have, so you begin to experience what some of the possibilities are, because I would like to move it from imagination to, I've been at this 120 days and I've really learned a lot about myself in that 120 days. Now we can be clearer about intention.
So go out and get in traffic.
In traffic, indeed.
Got it. Well, great. And we'll make sure to link to all of those as well. And like I mentioned in the intro, we'll have some copies of your book as well. And people, in order to get that, just leave a review on the podcast, and and then you copy and paste that to an email at asknate@retirementrescueradio.com, and we'll end up sending you a free copy. So that'll work out great. George has been kind enough to give us a few copies, so we appreciate that, and we'll just send them out until they're gone.
Okay, great.
All right.
That's wonderful. It's been a great conversation. I thank you, Nate, for the opportunity.
Well, George, thank you for coming on and spending some time and willing to share your wisdom with my listeners here. I think you're going to help rescue some, I won't call it retirements now, some later in life transitions. You'll help people kind of help figure out what it is they may want to do, the different things they may want to do, not just the one thing, the different things that they could possibly find themselves doing.
And knowing that they don't have to find one thing and it doesn't have to last forever.
That's right. Two good parting pieces of advice right there. Well, I think we'll just have to end on that, I think.
All right, cool. Glad to talk to you. Thanks for the time.
Once again, take care. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.